Thanks, Ananya. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here. How you doing, Ananya?
Good. How are you, Mike?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. I've now closed the YouTube video in the background, so I'm not hearing myself from 10 seconds ago. And we're excited to see folks. If you want to pop something in the chat about where you're joining us from, I am Mike, joining you here from Toronto, Ontario in Canada. Ananya, where are you?
Yeah, and I'm here close to Houston, Texas. It's a nice, warm winter's day out here.
What does a warm winter day mean to you?
It's like it's in the 60s, high 60s.
Wow. It's also a warm winter day in
It's a
Toronto.
little bit chilly.
Yeah, where it's maybe 25 degrees and sunny, which is a warm winter day here.
Yeah. Oh, Sweden, nice.
Well, we will take maybe another minute or so, let people roll in and join us.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm ever looking at the ground distracted, it's because we have maybe one more slight co-host. My dog has a little paw injury, so she needs to stay in this room. So this is Ada. She'll be helping us by adding some adorableness a little bit on the stream.
I love the floppy ears. The floppy ears are the best.
Yeah. If things are going a little slowly, we'll pop Ada back up here and get the cuteness factor up a little bit.
The cuteness.
Oh, Brett joining us 6 a.m., 57 degrees. Lucky. Well, why don't I go ahead and start sharing my screen and not just my dog.
Hi, Anna. All right.
All right, so I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Hopefully folks can see that text. If you're having any trouble with that, let us know. I'm just adjusting this aspect ratio a little bit to get it nicely on the screen.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Wonderful. Well, here is a link to the notebook that we're going to be working out of on exploratory data analysis. And we're excited to move through it.
This, right?
What's that?
Folks can fork this notebook, right?
Yes, and we will show you what that means if you are new to working on Observable. If you do want to save any of the work that you do, signing up for and logging into your free Observable account will help that go smoothly. But you're also welcome to sort of follow along and see how exploratory data analysis on Observable works.
All right.
So why don't we get started? This notebook, as a brief overview, is going to be filled with a variety of data-driven questions, as well as some techniques for answering those questions. So we're going to move through at a nice pace. And if there's anything that you missed, you'll see these show me boxes that pop up. And you can click on those, and they'll give you the code, and they'll show you sort of the expected results. So you can always refer back to those. What we're going to do to leave this notebook without any of our additional work is we'll create what's called a fork, so our own working copy of that. You can do the same thing by clicking on these 3 buttons up here and clicking on the fork button. I am logged into a couple of different teams. If you aren't, you'll probably just see your own account. And I'll go ahead and fork that. And if you do work on a team, you can share that with other members of your team. So right now, I'll share that with Ananya, and she can go ahead and edit this.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem. It'd be rather rude if I didn't do that. And in case we do make some changes that are specific to this workshop that go a little bit off of some of the intended pieces, I'll go ahead and share this. Excuse me. I'll go ahead and publish this unlisted. So we're not going to see it in the stream of recent notebooks. We can also give this a custom URL like February 23rd workshop. So this is published unlisted, so folks outside of our organization can see it. I'll go ahead and put that here in the chat as well. And right now, you'll see the published version if you go to that notebook. And throughout the workshop, Ananya and I will republish this so you can see any of our ongoing work. You'll notice that both of our avatars are popped up here in the right because we're both actively working on the notebook. Any questions about that setup? Or Ananya, did you have anything to add about that?
Oh, it's nice to not be alone in a notebook.
Oh, there's
nice
something
to have
just
a friend.
So comforting when you see that pop up there. Particularly, you have a question, you kind of ask other people on your team, hey, does anyone know how to do this? And you see their avatar pop up. But sometimes if you leave that tab open, people think that you're working in there and you've gone off and are working on something else. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Here we have a table of contents of the different sections that we're working on that align with how people often work with exploring their own data sets. So we'll be showing you how you can load your data and search through it, ways that you can visualize that data, both in sort of static and interactive forms. We'll have a set on what we've labeled here, visual computations. So ways that you can actually compute things about your data set as you do your visualization. And also showing an example of using D3. Oh, I know you love D3. I know, but you're also so excited about plot. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. The data set that we're working with, we've prepared in another notebook, and we're actually bringing it into this notebook. But it is this awesome open data set that Google put out with different analytics of the Google Merchandise Store. So there are all sorts of different web page events. One of our colleagues, Ian, did a whole lot of processing and cleaning up of that data set to make it more user-friendly and usable in situations like these. And we have it in a particular database client where we can explore it as if we're connected to a different type of database.
Right.
So
it's because in observable notebooks we can connect securely to databases, right? And explore the data using SQL queries like we'll do in this workshop. But for security reasons, database connections only work in a private notebook or in a team setting because you need access credentials to get to them, right? So for the purpose of this exercise today, so that we can all work together with this data, we've loaded it into this client-side database that's running in your browser using DuckDB, actually. And many thanks to Ian for setting that up for us.
Yeah, thank you for that very articulate description that I was trying to leap over. And if you're new to Observable, if you have any, there are a variety of ways you can connect to your data. So if you click on this paperclip icon, you can see that you can upload a file attachment, something like a CSV file, and also connect to databases and cloud files. Again, those are accessible in private notebooks for security reasons. Okay, so the first thing we can do is describe the tables that are in the database, and calling db.describe here. You'll notice that this is a code cell. This is a JavaScript cell. We'll showcase some of our different cell types as we move through here, but that is in contrast to one of these cells above where we're just writing some markdown so we can provide some information, some links. Here we have a JavaScript cell where we run this line of JavaScript. Something that is new in the last few months is that we've released a SQL cell, so a cell that is dedicated to writing SQL code. You can see Ananya's avatar just popped up in the code section. And by default, we are displaying these results from the database. So we've got a selection here from items. Ananya, if you want to say limit that request to 5 items, so if you add like a limit 5, we can see that those results are automatically updated and the code there is describing the selection that we're doing. I know the SQL Cell is so exciting.
Yeah, I really like this thing about the SQL. So if you're working with a lot of SQL queries in a notebook, and you don't have to constantly do a db.query, and you don't have to constantly do an inputs.table to see the results of your query. So it's just so convenient to have the SQL Cell when you're working with SQL data a lot.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Just looking at the chat here, one question about the data set that we're using.
Oh, yeah.
We just have a link here that I'll grab to the notebook where Ian did the preparation, and there's a lot of description in there about how that was done.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we've selected a couple of items from this table. Now, if we want to describe a particular table that we have in our database, we can pass the name of that table to the db.describe function. So here we've got a JavaScript cell where describe, and the name of the table that we want to describe is called events. So in a few minutes, we'll see how we can get a better or a more visual summary of this. But here we have the different names and types of the columns that are present in this table. And again, you can click on these show me buttons to see both the code that is there. You can copy that code by clicking on the button, which will copy that same string for you. And we can also see the results there. All right, so now if you want to get warm your fingers up, start writing some of this code yourself as well, we can write a SQL query where we select all purchases from the events table. To do that, we can say that the type is equal to purchase. So we can say we want to select everything, pass in the name of the table that we're interested in, which is called events. And then we have this, this filter that we're applying here where the type is equal to purchase. And there are a few different ways you can execute that line of code. There's a keyboard shortcut, Shift-Enter, that will allow that, as well as this blue play button over here that whenever you've made some edits, you can click to run that cell.
Interesting. Do you know what other types of what other types there are other than purchase?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I will now make my first confession, which is that I am not a SQL expert by any stretch of the imagination. So
I guess we could just look at the events table real quick, right, to see. So if I go back up to where we were looking at the items table, if we look at the events table there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I see another one that says like add to cart.
Oh, I see. So we have different types there.
Yeah.
I'll bet that someone has maybe even already put this in the chat, but there's probably something we can do with that. Open up another SQL cell and connect to this database. Cool. And I bet we can say something like select distinct. Is that first I have to know how to spell it.
Select distinct type from events.
Cool. Distinct. Actually, I've got a dog bothering one of my hands. Ananya, can you select distinct type events? I know, it's so exciting.
Well, there we go.
That's super helpful.
So there are events where people actually purchased something, and there are events that people added things to a cart but never purchased, which happens a lot.
That's funny. I feel like
interesting.
I'm not such a frequent online shopper, but I feel like once I've added something to the cart, I'm gonna end up purchasing it. Like, I don't often.
Sometimes you need to sleep on it, and.
Interesting. Another area of exploration of this data set would be, of course, looking at things that are added to the cart but don't end up getting purchased.
Never bought. Yeah.
Cool. And I think that is, we don't want to go too far off of our intended exploration here, but we'll certainly.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah, we'll certainly get to meander a bit as we move through this. All right, so now we know these different event types, these sort of web analytics events. And as mentioned earlier, not a SQL expert, so we have just a few of these lines of code already created. So here, if we wanted to know the revenue by item of these different items, the prices of those items are in the items database. So we'll just do a simple join here where we select from events, join on the items table. Here, limit to the type equals purchase. And we're just looking at a quick subset. Here we've limited it to 5. But we can see we've got this price in USD over here. So now we know the price of each one of these items associated with each one of these events. So for example, the Google large tote white bag was $10 US, and it was in the category bags. And as Ananya, you pointed out earlier that these are actual items, right? That if we quickly search for these, we can see what these different items are inside of the Google merchandise store.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, this is the thing that at the time was $10. It looks like in my browser, it's listed as 13, though that also might be in Canadian dollars as opposed to US dollars.
Right.
So as we're moving through this, if you see different items that you're curious about, you can see what they are. All right, and then I think our last SQL query here, we've gone ahead and joined these tables together and then added up the total revenue and count. So we can see here what the most popular items were, this zip hoodie being the highest number of purchases at 256, and also the highest revenue at $12,000 here.
Nice. It's also really cool that the SQL Cell lets you page through the results at the top.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So we can see both the title. I haven't explored this too much. We can switch how many are displayed on each one of these pages. And then we can also paginate through them. I'm, of course, curious what's at the end here. Looks like specific lapel pins for different areas. And the light yellow pen only purchased once in this. I think it's about a 3-month time span that we're working with.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So the SQL Cell is one great way both to query against your databases and then also see your results. But there are a lot of different ways that we can interact with those data sets that we're gonna explore here. So one way that we can do that is with a variety of inputs that are available in Observable. Somewhere that we'll return to a few times is this snippet side pane that has code skeletons for creating different types of elements or inputs that were just described. Later on, we'll get to using different types of plots. Also have some shortcuts for getting some code snippets for manipulating data. But the thing that we want here is a table input. And here we can say that the data that we want to view is called items. That was our items database that we wanted to work with. So this is a quick interactive table. You can click on your column headers to sort them, to quickly do that sort of visual scanning of your table. Maybe you want it sorted alphabetically or by category or by brand. We have a couple of different brands in this data set. So this is giving us the individual rows. A nice way to get a summary of a data set is to import this summary table. Now, if you're new to Observable, you can require things like NPM packages into your notebook, but you can also bring in data or functionality from another notebook. So here we have this summary table notebook that defines a function for us for getting a visual summary of a data set. This has some instructions for bringing it into any notebook that you're working in. And then here are the visual results of what that looks like. This notebook is using the penguins data set as an example. What we want to do here, now that we've already imported the summary table, is to pass the items data to the summary table function. Looks like we need to add a code cell here. So we can take summary table. I love the autocomplete, especially because I'm just full of typos here or getting jumped on by a dog. So we've got a summary table function, and then the data set that we want to pass into that function is called items. Here are our visual results that come up. A quick summary, we have our different column types. So we have both ordinal and continuous data here. And then we have sort of these different visual distributions of our data sets. Anything that jumps out at you, Ananya?
I mean, I see a lot of categories, but I don't see too many brands. And just going up at the table, it's most of the brand is most of the items are branded Google, which makes sense for a Google merchandise store, I guess.
That makes sense. And it looks like Android, YouTube.
Android, YouTube, Google Cloud.
Right. So maybe we even want to think of these as like sub brands to the Google brand on the Google
Right.
merchandise store.
Mhm.
And also, distributions here. We have lots of items that are sold not that many times, and for that, not that much revenue.
Not that much money. Mhm. Very cool.
Great.
I mean, it's great to be able to see a summary like this. It kind of helps you form questions in your mind of, what you may want to explore.
Yeah. Anything jumping out for you? Things that you might want to explore?
Yeah, I mean, this thing you said about a lot of items being sold for not so much. Like if you look at count and revenue, I guess um, that would be interesting to see what the outliers are, right? I think we do plan on seeing count and revenue, but I'm curious to see what the outliers are.
Yeah.
Which items get sold for more, or which items are more popular than others.
Yeah, and maybe the high revenue items are high priced items, right? Maybe we have something that is
Mhm.
sold at a higher price, so the relationship between count and revenue might not be this linear relationship.
Right, exactly.
All right, so we've got a view of our table here. You can see the actual rows in our data set. We've got a summary overview of that data set, where we see sort of a snapshot of each one of those columns. Something that's really helpful for interacting with your data is to connect different cells that you have in your notebook. So this is sort of an observable specific technique and functionality that took me a little bit to understand the real impact of. But each time a cell is reevaluated or something connected to it is reevaluated, any connected cell will reevaluate. So if you search something over here, then the display of that search, or whether that's a table or a plot, is also going to be updating. And that is this concept of views. So here, when we have a view of something, our input is actually going to return something into that variable. So for example, if I just say search, that is our array of 394 items. And if I search for hoodie, you can see that that's going to return 20 items. And I didn't have to go back through and manually reevaluate each cell as you might in other types of notebook environments. Here, that's just going to automatically update each time it's changed. Quick call out to the Minimap over here is you can see the relationships between cells. So here you can see that this cell is connected to this other cell. And as you start to maybe have different data preparation steps and different sort of connections, you can see these really interesting webs that emerge. You can also see where your friends are. It's like, oh, Ananya is still hanging out up here.
Where am I?
You're up here in the items
Let me
table.
join you in the same. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Nice to see you.
I found you in the Minimap, and hey.
So we can combine the two things we just described, right? This search input and then our table, where we could just say inputs.table, and rather than pass in the data set called items that we were working with, we can just pass in search. Now, anytime I search for hoodie, we're only going to see those items that match that search term. So those are all of the hoodies there. What's cool is we can also do that with the summary table, right? We could say, well, why don't we make a summary table of the search? I'll just drag this cell above the table for now. And whenever we enter some search term here, we're going to see that reflected in the table. So here are all of the rows. But if we just want maybe any item that is colored black, we can see that there are 30 rows, and we can see what those different names are, and we can see that the word black is appearing in all of those.
It's really handy.
Yeah. And I really do like seeing these relationships in the Minimap, right? We can see here's our data set items. It's going into the search. That search is then present in these handful of cells. Really cool relationships here. Shout out to our coworker Toph, who I know worked endlessly on this. All right. Any questions about this first step of getting your data loaded in, seeing that data, searching through that, and seeing summaries of that data before we get into visualizing it, exploring it a bit more? All
Maybe,
right.
yeah, let's jump in and start looking at some charts and plots, and you can keep an eye on the chat and see what comes.
Awesome. Yeah. Take it away.
Yeah, so it's Mike has written these great SQL queries for us. We have some idea of what's in the tables, and now we can start working on some charts and see what some relationships are. So let's say we want to make a simple scatter plot of revenue versus count, right? And so we can go back to our snippets pane on the right, and there are these little handy examples of, basic examples of the plot API usage that we can use to build upon. So let's say we choose the scatter plot option. So it brings in a little example here, and you can just replace the variables with your data and your X and Y's. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Let's say we want X account, so how many, and revenue there. And yeah, so see how quick and easy that was. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Plot, it's built on top of the very powerful D3JS library, and it's just one level of abstraction above it. So it lets you, it's a simpler and easier to remember API, and it's just super flexible, helps you build all kinds of charts, really quick and easy to explore data using Plot. All right, so let's see. So we have this scatter plot now, and we see there are some items top right. So they brought in a lot of revenue. I see the numbers are cut off, so I'm going to add a little bit of a margin on the left. Maybe this is enough. Yeah. Okay. So we have a few outliers, right? There's some that are bringing in a lot of revenue, and also very popular. So a lot of them were purchased. And at this point, you're probably thinking this is nice, and I'd like to know what these items are. So the nice thing about Plot is you can always layer in additional marks. So for example, a dot, this geometric shape that we've added to the plot, is a mark. We can replace it with a text mark instead if you wanted to. So I'm just going to copy this piece of code. And
which is most coding, right?
Which is
just
most
copying and
coding.
pasting
Copy and
code
paste
that you
is
or
where you
somebody else
begin.
wrote.
Right. So if I replace the dot mark with a text mark, and we need to add a text channel so we can tell Plot what we want the text to be. So let's say we want it to be the name of the item. So there you have it. So now the dots are replaced with text. Mike, we probably want both, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the awesome thing about working with something based on the grammar of graphics. So ggplot2 is based on the grammar of graphics. We don't have to think just about chart types, right? There's not a scatter plot, but we can work with these different layers of marks and showcase what we want.
Right. That's what makes it so flexible. You can build up on top of something. Let's see, we don't need the text channel and the dot here, do we? There we go. Nice. So we have the text overlapping with the dot. So let's put in an anchor. Yeah, okay.
Read my mind.
There you go.
It's a great problem to have
end.
when you're both trying to solve the same problem.
Right, a little bit of an offset. That's nice. So this is cool. It shows us The Google Zip hoodie is extremely popular and is also bringing in a lot of revenue. Maybe we can color by put in some color here. Let's see. It's fill by. What were some of the other columns in our data set? We have category and brand. So let's try category. Ooh.
Oh, I like that you're having them match. And in the meantime, we can add a color legend. So we've got our color here, and we can just say legend true. Shout out to our colleague Phil, who has done some extraordinary work on our legends here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have a suggestion from E to Dev to use to increase the font size for the ones that are super popular.
Gonna say the same exact thing.
So let's see, and under the text, let me try that. Would that go? That would probably go in style, right? Mike?
I actually think I think font size is a channel.
Okay.
So in the same way that we want these other visual features to be driven by something in our data, we can add font size up there as well.
Let's see. Woo!
Hey! Exactly what I thought would happen, right?
Sure.
So I wonder.
Maybe we can let's scale this down a little bit.
Yeah. So if anyone here is not super familiar with JavaScript, what Ananya is doing is just writing a short accessor function here to go in, and for each one of our rows, we're going to take the count and we're going to divide it by 10. That's awesome. Now you can see our code is getting a little cluttered. There are all sorts of really nice keyboard shortcuts to edit in the notebook and do something like auto format your code. If you ever forget them, you can click on this question mark, scroll on down, and here we have all of these different keyboard shortcuts for inserting, deleting cells. I really feel like I should memorize some more of these for my own editing. But one that I do often is format code automatically. So Option or Command Shift F. So if I'm just in this cell, oh, there we go. Have some really nice code here.
Nice. Very handy. I think if you actually just use the question mark on the keyboard, it takes you straight to the shortcuts in the help pane. So that's a handy way to get to keyboard shortcuts.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah. So you don't have to scroll.
Very handy.
All right.
I feel like one of my many personal flaws is that I get excited about the chart that we've got here, and the colors and changing different attributes, and I don't pause quite enough and think about what I'm noticing.
What are you noticing? Yeah.
I won't do that, but I'll ask you that question, Ananya. What is it that you notice here in this chart? Are there things that you are surprised by or that you'd like to further explore?
I mean, a couple of things. I mean, clearly, it looks like apparel is all over. Apparel is the most revenue generating thing here, based on the color. And another interesting thing I see the exact same item, the Google crew neck sweatshirt in navy is a lot more popular than green. Mike, would you buy green or navy?
Definitely navy.
See, there you go.
So I guess that both of us would have some sort of like pink, maroon colors. We seem to have similar palettes in our backgrounds and on our own apparel here.
Right. So that's interesting to me. It's the exact same item, but clearly one is more popular than the other, just based on color.
Yeah. One other quick change to make. Is this what we want to do? That do what I thought? So just aligning those, the legend there, in case you missed what exactly that did. If we take that 100 pixels out, they're just aligning each new element in legend with the next one. But if we want them to all be the same width, we can just say we want each one of those columns to be 100 pixels. And there are a whole bunch of configurations that you can make on the legends. There's the URL. We can also go ahead and pop that in the chat.
So we have some comments in chat about how it's getting crowded and how apparel is kind of taking over. So there are many ways we can filter the data we're looking at. I mean, it's always possible. You could filter the data in in a JavaScript cell before you passed it to plot, but it's really handy that you can just add a filter here inside plot. So, for example, if I can't really read what's here on the bottom left of the chart, so I could just filter those text marks out by adding a quick filter function here and say only show things that are bringing in revenue more than let's say 7,000.
Awesome.
And that's just one example. So we have a suggestion here. You can filter out apparel. You can filter out that category if you like. So let's see, under in the dot plot, if we say add a filter b dot category not equals what is it called, apparel, and we want the same thing in here. But I'm afraid we won't have much in the, so I'll take this revenue one out because we won't have that won't work if we do that filter, because all the high revenue generating stuff is all apparel. There you go.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it's real fun to play with filters in plot. It really helps you just focus on what you want to see.
And something that I love, and I think we're going to shift into momentarily, is that it's great to make these code edits and see the results. But something else that we can do is we can take the logic that we're describing, like a particular threshold, and we can expose that through an input. And we have all of these different range sliders and checkboxes and buttons, and we can tie our charts to that logic so that we can explore that more quickly through a user interface. And so we can share with other people who might not know how to make these code edits, but they can explore through the menus, right? So people who might be less familiar with or confident in JavaScript can go ahead and do that data exploration really quickly. So it looks like we just jumped through these next few steps, which is awesome. We've gotten through these labeled values. Should we go ahead and try and make some of these interactive?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's see. Where are you, Mike? Let me find you in the Minimap. There you are. Okay. Yeah, so let's add a range slider, and we can use that to expose a variable for the threshold above which we want to focus on for revenue. So let's call that
I'll call that limit.
Limit. Good idea.
What's really nice is you can tap through these.
The range needs to be something big, right? Like I think 14,000 should work.
And we can call this or we can label it as minimum label, something like that.
Yeah. And then I think let's have a default value. We can have the default value be 7,000, which is what we started with. Okay. So now,
we can also just add a quick step so that we're going sort of one at a time here.
So now if we look at the limit variable here, and see as you move the slider around, it updates that variable. So we could.
I like how we're doing the exact same thing.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so let's put that into our plot, Mike. Should just go upstairs and copy this over. So over here where it says 7,000, I'm going to change that to.
Where did you go? You're up here.
To limit, and now Should we bring that range slider up here so we can see? I'm just gonna.
Yeah, a few things we could do. Maybe we can just copy and paste this code so it's down
Oh yeah.
more or less in that section there.
Yeah, sure, makes sense.
Where were we? All right, interactive visualization. There's our range slider. Then here we have this. We can pin and unpin cells so that you can hide the code. Unfortunately, I can't hide it because Ananya is in there. But if Ananya jumps up to the cell above, I can collapse this cell here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can you just focus on a different cell?
Yeah.
Than this.
Oh yeah, because I was in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So now we can sort of toggle the visibility here. So we can easily go in and edit code contents, but also we can hide that if we're not necessarily that interested in it. And then we have this this awesome interaction where we can say, well, which ones are we interested in, and we can filter that there. And it looks like. What are you doing, Ananya? Reading my mind.
So we can actually add a visual for what we're changing by just adding a little a line that shows the threshold on the plot. So just a simple rule y, and it's just one value, which is our limit, right? So now try playing with the slider. Cool.
It's amazing how that is so. It's like viscerally more enjoyable. I feel like I'm like erasing and unveiling these different labels.
Yeah, we'll play with this. It's fun. All right. So, Mike, it feels like most of the time, I mean, we're kind of interested in these outliers in the top right. So maybe we should just focus on those. What do you think?
How do you mean?
So instead of having everything on the chart, should we make a chart just focused on these high revenue items? Because it seems like that's what we're spending most of our time looking at. What do you think?
Sure. Do you want to, how would you like to do that?
Yeah, so there's this really great snippet. It's called a top 10 chart, which basically just makes a quick bar chart of the top 10 items, or well, you can configure it to see what you want to see, but there it is. Can you grab that real quick?
I see. I thought you were going to make us filter the domain of our axes there, but you're pushing us down to our next great idea down here.
Okay. So let's see. So let's change our data to items, and the group Y is great if you have to aggregate something, but in this case, when you did the SQL query, you had already aggregated the prices of each item into revenue. So we don't really need the aggregation here. We can just use X and Y. This is what I like about Plot. You start with something and you can customize it to what you need. So let's say X is revenue and Y is our item name. There you go. Maybe we need a little bit of a margin. That work? Maybe a little bit more. Oh, nice! I see you're putting in a range slider there.
I just can't. I can't help.
You can't help it.
It's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But here we're working together to put this together. We're only interested in a handful of items, maybe 10, but quickly you want to see.
Maybe you want to see 15.
Right, or you want to see all the top 100.
Nice. So Mike, what do you think is a good way to put color in here?
It's a loaded question. I think color, like using it effectively, it will depend on your question. And often you'll see these charts where there are 100 items and people have 100 colors, right? They're either slightly different or you have a color palette of 10 that's repeated over and over again. I think with something like this, you often just want to draw attention to something, right? To some set of observations. So if we wanted to call out a certain item or some certain items, like let's say we want everything that is a particular color, right? Black or green, or maybe I see like T is coming up for t-shirts. So we've got this prompt below that suggests that we have a text box, and then anything someone types into that text box will match in the chart. So we don't have to prescribe that you're interested in t-shirts or something green. We just give you a text box that you can type into and see what items match that input text. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right.
So it'll kind of highlight that on this chart.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and use the snippet side pane again to have a text input. And we can call that highlight. To give it a more descriptive label like search in chart. And then I will grab, I'm just going to copy and paste this chart above. Now we've got the same chart, but what we'll need is some sort of way of matching this term highlight. Luckily, we have a quick suggestion here that says, let's use one of these accessor functions such that the name of each item includes whatever someone has typed into the box. So we can copy and paste that down here, adding one more visual channel. I always forget the comma afterwards. Now, if we want things that are black, does this have to be? All right, so here are the items that are black. This would be helpful if you're on a design team and you're seeing which colors are popping out as popular, or why is why the green sweatshirt but nothing else that's green.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Anything else jump out at you?
So Brett pointed out in the chat something. It's everything you see is apparel, but there's if you look at top 20, I think there's something in there called a Google bike, Google Campus bike. Well, it's in the top. It's in the top.
There we go.
15. Yeah, a Google Campus bike. It's a non-apparel, high-revenue item. Kind of stands out amongst all of the tees and sweatshirts. Another interesting thing is if I go look at the top 20, I see yeah. You see, we talked about the crew neck sweatshirts and how navy is more popular than green. So color matters, but now I also see that brand matters because you have the Android crew neck sweatshirt, also a crew neck sweatshirt, but for some reason not as popular as the Google crew neck sweatshirt.
Interesting. Also,
so, the only difference there is brand.
Yeah.
Well, maybe color, but yeah.
Brand, color, also paying close attention. Like I just assumed typing in the word crew would match all my crew necks, but it's also matching crew socks, which I guess are a different height of sock.
Nice.
And we can, of course, combine some of these different techniques, right? If we do want to use our fill, like let's say let's comment that out for a second. You'd mentioned brand, so we can say something like fill is the brand. And now we quickly can get those brands to pop out. I wonder, can we do the fill opacity? If it includes highlight, we make it 1. Otherwise, we make it 0.1. Let me guess, I forgot the comma. Unexpected. Oh, you fixed my code somehow.
No, yeah, I just added a legend. But
might have evaluated the code around the same time.
Yeah.
So I think this we're maybe getting into dangerous uses of colors, sort of mixing up color opacity in the fill. But I think this actually works out pretty decently, where we still have information about the brand of each one of these different items, but we can draw attention to the ones of interest. Maybe that opacity of 0.1 is too faint, maybe 0.5, 0.4. If I were really diving into it, I would just add a slider for the opacity, but we don't need to overuse that technique.
Nice.
All right. So we've filled by brand, we've added a legend. I think we're ready to move on to a different one here, yeah?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So do you want to take on this first prompt of revenue by category?
Yeah, let's see. So let's look at our revenue by category. So I'm just let's take the plot we made. And instead of looking at let's see, what do we want to do here? We want to look at, instead of the name, let's look at category here.
Oh, wow. And we've got some of these lingering, the lingering opacity there, where we can actually see the different items from the search above.
So interesting, yeah.
Which I'm not sure we want to do a search within a bar here. This is pretty interesting, though. And just to demonstrate, we can drag this down here. So we can see that it's going in and it's stacking these by default. So we didn't even have to tell Plot to take each one of them and compute their position. It's just gone ahead and done that for us here. I think if we want to add an order by category, that's what we want. We can order by brand. Then each one of these should have all of them sort of placed along one another by brand there.
Nice.
So we can see that most of the apparel is Google. That's maybe not surprising. Like all of the bags are Google, all the campus collection is Google. So we only see these other items in some of those different categories.
Right. And apparel stands out, right? Like just based on just the first scatter plot we saw, we already kind of guessed that apparel was most of it. And you can see that even more clearly here.
Yeah. So this is leading me to this next question of interest, is if we wanted to sort of filter some of these out, right? If I wanted to be able to compare Android to Google Cloud, like they're sort of overwhelmed right now by the volume of Google branded sales.
Yeah.
We can use another technique here. Right? We can use another input, in this case, some checkboxes. You can see that it was just some checkboxes here with all of those different values. And when we toggle these on and off, we're getting a list of brands, right? Just like we were with the range slider, when we make a change to that input, the value is updated. So here we can take the chart above and we can just add a filter statement that says, let's only include these brands.
Nice.
So we can, maybe I'll copy and paste this down below. You don't need to see these 5 brands listed there. And it really is just one line of code in here where we can say, let's filter this. And let's just say that this set of brands, this variable called brands, includes, contains, I always mix these up.
I think includes, yeah.
And to test if this works out, we can then unselect these different brands. Let's say we're only interested in these 3. We can see those 3 values and now quickly compare. Oh, it looks like Android is.
Awesome. Yeah.
I feel like I have that experience every day, right? Working with the Plot API, working in the notebook. Like I just pause and, oh, this is.
Yeah.
Like the rate at which we can ask questions it's awesome,
It's
right?
awesome. And you can spend most of your time, you can put together a chart so quick, and then you can just spend most of your time sitting back and thinking about it and playing with the inputs and analyzing, instead of spending most of your time figuring out how to add a legend, or how to make things align or order properly. That stuff is quick, and then you can just sit back and make sense of the data.
Yeah. And Anya, what are some of the other like visualization libraries you've used in comparison? Like I'm not actually sure where some of your visualization background is from.
um, so when I first started learning JavaScript, I started with the D3JS examples on Observable, and it used to take quite a bit of time to kind of get the basic structure there, and put all these little SVG elements together. And I have to say, when Plot came out, it got so much easier to get to the insight, you know, to get to a point where you can start to analyze instead of focusing on putting the SVG elements together. And I mean, D3 is great because you can build anything with it, right? It's so flexible. But if you want to quickly explore, data, it's nice to go just one level of abstraction higher, so you can kind of spend more time looking at the data itself.
Yeah. Similar thoughts and experience where working with D3 is awesome, and you can get that customization. But if I wanted, if this were a D3 workshop, if we were trying to have in the last hour made these types of interactive charts, bar charts, and it's not super complex, right? We have a bar chart and a scatter plot, but we have the interactivity, we have the labels. Like these are things that would have certainly would have taken me more than an hour to make this chart from scratch using D3.
Right. And then you forget, what was the question you were after, because you're stuck figuring out a drop down menu or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, working in Observable specifically, where you have this connection between the inputs and the charts, you don't have to worry about setting up event listeners, and you don't have to wait for your page to load in your data and promise this and then that. And it sort of it solves a lot of the JavaScript problems for us, right? That we can actually figure out things about the data instead of things about JavaScript promises.
So true. And I mean, even with this data, we've already explored so much already, but I feel like the more you do, the more questions you have. Like, and we kind of started talking about this earlier, right? Like, there's so many other things, and guys who are watching, feel free to type in the chat what else you'd like to explore with this data. We talked about earlier, are there things people are putting in the cart but never checking out? Are there things that people like to buy together? Like, if I bought this, I also bought this. um, you know or how do prices of things vary over time? There's all sorts of things that you could, ask of this data. And we really hope that after the workshop, you guys take this and build all kinds of awesome charts, answer all kinds of questions, and we hope to see your notebooks.
Yeah. There's so many interesting ways to explore.
Yeah.
And I think one way to enable that is to talk about this next section about how Plot enables different types of transformations or computations. So I always used to think about your data preparation over here and your visualization over there. And there are a lot of cases where that's a useful approach, but Plot has a lot of built-in computational power where you can aggregate, you can count, you can have rolling averages. Like there are a lot of things that Plot can do for you, where it's almost removed a preparatory step for me, where I no longer have to do this work over here and then you're plotting over there. How have we not mentioned the cheat sheets yet?
Oh yeah.
We got to have these different links in here. Ananya, why don't you save me some embarrassment and talk about the cheat sheets a little bit?
Well, actually, we were just working with color and legends, and anytime I'm working with this kind of stuff, I always have questions like, what are the other colors we could possibly be using? categorical diverging color scales, who knows. And Mike and the design team in Dunstan and the design team have put out these beautiful cheat sheets that you can use with Plot. And I mean, you could print them out, they're PDFs, and but there are also these fancy interactive version on Observable available that uh, you could basically play with it. So if you had a question about how a certain mark worked, or what does the margin left do, what does order do, you could just go to these cheat sheets and just play with the variables and see what changes. It's such a great way to learn. And if you print them out and keep them on your desk, it's a very handy reference. I use them all the time.
Oh, thanks. That's yeah. I mean, the PDFs are just beautiful,
And they're so beautiful. Yes, you have to get a color printout. It's
yeah,
so pretty.
yeah. A huge credit to our whole design team, and the notebooks themselves. I find a great way to explore just what different color schemes would look like, and what different variable scale types end up looking like. The layouts one is actually one that I've used a lot, just trying to understand like margin and inset, where you're trying to understand like where exactly these spacings, how exactly they'll affect your chart there. So this is a project that I
It's
worked
so
on.
fantastic that the cheat sheets are interactive. I mean, because it really helps you understand, and you don't have to explain it in words because somebody can just use the slider to figure out exactly what it means.
Yeah, but we were talking about transformations,
Yeah.
right? We wanted to look at some of the different ways that we can group our data, or stack our data, or have rolling averages of our data. So, all right, we want to know the average revenue by brand across those different items. That makes sense. So looking at this piece of code here, we can again draw our bars in the, I guess in this case, in the Y direction. And then we want to do a few things. We want to group along our x-axis. I feel like I have to say it out loud to say, bars in the Y direction, and then group in the X, on the X channel. And we might want to count how many values there are in each category. So we think about this as our reducer, right? This is the function that gets applied, and then these are the way that we form our groups. So we can start with that count there, except we don't want to call it data. We have our items.
Nice.
Two different ways to use plot. You can either call the mark and then call .plot, or you can say plot.plot, which is what I typically do, end up having enough configurations. But for a quick plot, this is nice. So here we have the count, but there are a whole bunch of different reducers we could use, right? We could say that we want the mean. Ooh. But the mean of what?
Mean of what? Yeah.
Mean of what? Mean revenue.
That makes sense. Okay, cool.
That makes sense.
Let's see.
The maximum revenue, minimum revenue.
It's so easy. This is so easy to ask questions and get answers.
Yeah, and that I think initially this syntax I found a bit intimidating, sort of describing inside of your mark the computation that you want to do. In this case, the function that you want to apply, in which direction, right? The Y, you want to be showing the mean of something, and then those different input channels, right? This is sort of like one way of thinking is this is our output, this is our input, right? We're putting in brand revenue and computing the mean of that revenue grouped into those different X channels. Do you have a different way of thinking about that? I feel like it took me a few.
No, I think that is exactly that's excellent. Yeah. In my mind, I translate this kind of stuff into a sentence, just like you did. Take this, that's the output, and group it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And it looks like I jumped ahead of myself here. where if we're interested in other summary statistics, we can do what we've been doing all along, right? We can create some sort of visual input, in this case, a radio button with different reducers. And then all we have to do is replace mean with that reducer. So the variable that holds our string is called reducer. We'll unpin this cell just so that our chart and our radio buttons are a bit closer together. Can even drag that up. And now we can really quickly, even with our keyboard, right? I'm just clicking across these and can ask, 5 different questions really quickly here.
This is really cool.
Yeah. Google Cloud has a high minimum value. Like there's nothing, there are no Google Cloud items that are selling for a super low price. And now we can even, right, we can scroll back up and just look at our Google Cloud items. I guess that was this checkbox, right? We can just look at our Google Cloud, I guess seeing where those fall.
Oh, yeah.
But we could even, what else could we do? There's just so many different ways of interacting with this at this point, right? I'm even thinking back to the beginning where we have our, just our table, right? If we just want to look in our, where did our searchable table go? We might have dragged our search
You
around.
probably moved it around. Well, I mean, if you're somebody who's analyzing this data, and I mean, you probably are wondering how to price a certain item. I mean, these are the things you need to see. You need to be able to play with these plots and see, okay, maybe this is very popular and people won't mind paying a little extra for it. I don't know, but you can start, planning your strategy for pricing, and you can get to that a lot quicker because it's so easy to make the queries, to make the plots.
Yeah, and up here, even just having our search input and our summary table, we can see that there are only these 3 different Google Cloud items, right? Our Cloud Pen and our Cloud Zip hoodie. So it isn't as if there are all these really high selling items. There are just 3 items that are available there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, forgive my screen share scrolling. All right, we're in our visual computations here. This is, I think, a really interesting or really powerful technique is doing moving averages. So working with temporal data, it's often quite noisy, right? You have day-to-day fluctuations or hour-by-hour fluctuations, but we can also do our moving averages inside of the plot code. So if you asked me to compute a moving average of something, I would, 1, be upset because it would take a long time, and 2, I'd have to sort of look around for the right package or library to do that. Here, just to get a different subset of the data, we've got each one of the brands, the total revenue each day. So I won't dig into the SQL behind that, but we're storing that in a variable called by day. And let's walk through how we can make a 7-day moving average. That says by age. That doesn't sound right. By brand.
By brand.
So yeah, why don't we go ahead and start?
So Mike, when you, I mean, there are obviously ways for us to compute these outside in just in JavaScript and pass them to the plot. So when you're plotting and making these visualizations, which one do you prefer, and how do you go about making that decision? Is it does it help you to be able to do these transformations inside plot?
That's a great question. I think that the type of transformation dictates a lot of that. So there are a lot of transformations that are built into plot, right? You can group, as we've been showing, you can bin to make histograms, you can make stacked bar charts. you can normalize, so divide each one of your values by a common denominator, select only certain observations, have a moving average, and then a map gives you a more custom transformation. I often find if I'm trying to reshape my data, so if I have rows that I want to be columns or columns that I want to be rows, then I am most often turning to the Arcaro JavaScript library, which we put together a tool called the Data Wrangler to try and explore those different operations. So here is just a demo. This is sort of a user interface to help people learn how to write this type of code. This has a bunch of different protests and say the number of attendees at each one. And here we can see the different operations possible. It's a sort of a more robust group of operations built for working with data, including things like folding and pivoting and spreading. And here we can do something like only select a couple of different columns, like maybe we want different locations and dates. We can, oh, and how about the total number of attendees at each one of these protests? And then maybe you could group them by location and roll up the number of attendees and compute the mean and the count. And I think that's actually things that you could all do inside of Plot. But you can see that there are a whole bunch of other data manipulation operations that are available here in the Arcaro package. And you can see here the code that gets generated from the user interface that you're interacting with here.
Nice.
So to turn back to taking this moving average, yeah, why don't we write this out from the beginning? So we've been working with Plot enough. So here, Plot takes in an object, and now that we're close to the end, we can pick apart some of the syntax.
Yeah, let's do that.
And one of the keys of that object is our array of marks that we want to display for our data. And if we want a line chart, we can put in a line mark. The by day is our data. And then we have this second object that specifies the channels that we want to work with. So along our x-axis, we can have day. On our y-axis, we can have revenue. And we can stroke by brand. So not surprisingly, we see Google as standing out as having much higher revenue. We can include our legend again. So we can see what those are. But we wanted this 7-day moving average, right? We have these.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise up in here. Up and down.
Yeah. So what we can do is we can take these input channels and we can say that we want to plot dot window, right? We want to compute a moving average here in the y direction, right? Window y. And I think we pass in two objects, right? We want the y to be the mean. And then we say how many days we want or how many observations we want that window to contain. If we just say we want it to contain 1, that's not going to do anything, right? It's just the individual point. If we change that to 7, we get our 7-day moving average. So we can get a lot more of the seasonality of like the build up perhaps to, shopping before Christmas holidays. And then, quite the decline, and then another rise here in later January, though I'm not sure what might be associated with that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm tempted to have another. We're like pretty close to the bottom here, so.
Yeah, let me ask if anybody has suggestions or ideas of other questions we could ask of the data. Feel free to type them in the chat. We could always go off after this workshop and continue to explore in our notebooks.
I think what's cool this is what's amazing about plot is we can just switch that to dots, right? You don't necessarily always see a moving average with dots, but here we can still show those smoothed out and averaged there.
The thing I like about having the transformation in here is it's so easy for me to see what was done to the data.
Right.
I
You don't have to
go
trace it
another.
back.
Yeah, you don't have to trace it back to another cell to see what exactly am I looking at. It's and it just makes sense. Okay, it's windowed, it's an average, and it's just so much easier to understand what you're looking at.
Yeah, and just to be able to layer these, right?
Yeah, and just keep adding a name.
Oh,
Let's see. Maybe we just.
color, fill.
How about the category? Do we have category here?
Oh my. I was going to try and add one more selection around that selection, which is, can we just select the maximum?
Ah, okay.
And that's maybe all we had to do. So now we can get the maximum day of
The day of the maximum
of
revenue
sales.
for each
Yeah.
of these. Very cool.
Though we should probably do something better than just have the day here and do something like, this is where I'm going to get stuck. UTC format, right? We want to format something as a date. And maybe we just want like year dash month dash day. I don't know, maybe it's a lowercase m.
Okay.
Not a capital D day, lowercase d day. I actually think that there's something about this in the cheat sheets. Maybe the scales cheat sheet. Let's see what we've got. Axis option, tick formatting, dates. Look at that. So here we can see all the different ways, not all, many of the different ways that we can format, days, numbers. So %A, I like that. So maybe we say %A, comma, month. So now we have like that. Maybe we actually do want the day, like Tuesday, the 12th of December. When is not defined. Oh, thank you. And we can even offset this, right? We can have a dy of -10.
We had a nice suggestion from E2Dev to make the window size range slider.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right, so now we can see the maximum of each of these. I feel like I get excited about layering in more marks, but we could also think about just removing them for a second, right? When and where were the peak sales of each of those?
Very interesting.
And now we've got this range slider that's determining how many, what window we have for computing our moving average. And we can put that in window size.
We probably don't want a moving average to label the day of the max revenue, but yeah. You can always play with this more.
Yeah, keeping track of what exactly you're showing, right, is we're labeling the highest
within a window.
The highest averaged sales, right?
Right.
So that's perhaps a bit misleading. When you average by 20 days, the day with the maximum moving average is, say, December 8th there, but actually it's the 30th.
Right.
I mean, we could do something horrible. We could put them both on, right? Yeah. We can have the moving average maximum and the non-moving average maximum, but that really seems to be over the top.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah. We have a taste of D3 down here. there was a huge project undertaken to make these reusable D3 chart examples, which really has made getting started with D3 a lot easier, that you can pass in different parameters here. So you can import any one of these functions and then pass in a set of arguments to it. So if you didn't want to worry about computing your scales and drawing your axes in particular ways, you can use these D3 charts, and you just see, I think we have over 40 different charts that are in this reusable syntax. And here, rather than computing all of the different sizes that you have of your rectangles and configuring them exactly, here we can just set this, we can pass in our data and a few different parameters into this tree map function, and it's going to give us a tree map, something like a circular pie chart or a rectangular pie chart, where the area of each of these is proportional to the size of the revenue. And yeah, a great way to get started creating some more advanced charts and using D3.
Thanks, Mike. Looks awesome.
Yeah. Well, we've got just a few minutes left. Happy to answer any questions, either Ananya, if you have things on your mind, or anyone in the chat.
No, I'm just I'm really excited to go fork this and try and answer some of the other questions that came up. It's really nice to have this database to play with, and there's just so much we can do.
Yeah, and I often feel like I'm trying to sell a free product. Like Plot it's an open source visualization.
Oh yeah, it's
library,
open
right?
source, exactly.
I'm not trying to sell it to anyone, but the amount that we were able to do in an hour and a half here, right? Different SQL queries, having the connections between our inputs and our plots, different types of charts where we're customizing not only the data, but the visual marks that we are putting in, the number of items that we're rendering. Like, it feels like it was a lifetime ago that we were drawing this chart, doesn't it?
Yeah. And if you guys work with SQL cells and with Plot, and you have any suggestions or ideas for new features, or if you find any bugs, we'd love it if you would report those in our feedback repo. I'll paste the link here. We always love to hear from the community, and yeah, looking forward to see what you find.
Awesome. Well, this was super fun, Ananya. I loved sort of moving
I had
through
a
this
lot
with
of
you.
fun too. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, like I said,
Is Ada around to say bye? Is she? Is Ada?
Oh, Ada is curled up into a little ball.
Oh, okay.
She fell asleep. She got bored.
Oh.
And I hope that most of you stayed awake, but Ada was definitely put to sleep. Awesome. Well, like I used to say when I was a teacher, no one ever got mad for ending class early. So why don't we wrap this up and just say thanks one more time for joining us today, and looking forward to future sessions.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.